Today, I want to talk about why you need to disappoint others in order to avoid disappointing yourself, and why, when you fear disappointing others, it makes you abandon yourself and fall into a pattern of overgiving and over responsibility. When you grow up in a home with a narcissistic mother, you believe that your purpose in life is to keep her happy, to regulate her emotions. And this extends out to everyone else. So as you grow into adulthood, you fear disappointing other people so much, and that fear feels so life-threatening that you don't realize how much and how often you are letting yourself down every time you avoid that fear of letting someone else down. So it feels safer to not get what you want or not set the boundaries with other people that would enable you to have the life that you really want. That feels safer than it would to risk someone being unhappy with you, someone rejecting you, and so on. And if you watch this channel, you already know that this goes back to childhood when it felt like life or death to have your mother or anyone else be unhappy with you. And that's because you were so dependent on the mother and other adults in your life. Uh, you literally would die if they decided not to take care of you. And so you felt that very as something very real and very visceral in your nervous system. And you continue to feel that today. And this can show up in any kind of relationship. It can be your boss at work, it can be in your friendships and your romantic relationships. And this is why you might get the sense that you're constantly being taken advantage of, or maybe you're the person at work that always gets piled on, always gets stuck doing all the things that other people don't want to do, and so on. It's because those boundaries that would protect you from all the overwork and the overgiving and so on are just not there because you're so afraid to set them. You're so afraid of the rejection that will come if you do set them, which just shows that you are prioritizing what someone else wants from you over what you need for yourself. And that's because you haven't been given the opportunity to even tune into what you want or have permission to take care of your own needs. And so, this survival skill that you've developed, which is an adaptive coping mechanism, tells you that I can't set boundaries because I might lose something. I might lose this person, I might lose the job, but you don't think about the fact that you're losing yourself every time you don't set that boundary because in your conditioned mind, the way you've been conditioned as the child of a narcissistic mother is that actually you don't matter. What you want doesn't matter. You're not supposed to tune into that. In order to stay alive, I have to be more tuned into what other people want from me. And the message loud and clear is that my job on this earth is to make sure other people are happy with me, and that's how I survive. And this leads to codependency, which is really externalizing your self-worth or putting it in the hands of other people. So you're looking to others to tell you who you are, to tell you if you're okay. If you're happy with me, then I'm okay. If you're not happy with me, then I'm not okay. And as you may already know, this really wreaks havoc on your quality of life. Because if you are gauging your value on what someone else thinks about you, when in fact we have very little control over what someone else thinks about us, try as hard as we might, even if we're perfect, there are always going to be people who are not happy with us, who don't like us, and so on, which might sound horrifying to you because you're doing everything to avoid that, but that's the truth. So, in your desperation to avoid not being liked or not being valued or chosen or what have you, you may actually resort to manipulation in order to try and control other people's perception of you. And you might not even realize that you're being manipulative. And not the same kind of manipulation as a narcissist, say. It is the type that is designed to get a certain outcome because uncertainty is so uncomfortable for the child of a narcissist because, of course, if we don't know what's going to happen, the outcome can be very negative for us because we never knew how she was going to respond or how she was going to react or what we could do about that. So we were trying to control things in a way that would tell us what was going to happen. And even if that outcome was negative, we would prefer to know that ahead of time so we could prepare ourselves for it instead of being blindsided. So that's also why you expect the worst, possibly, is that expecting that negative outcome also feels safer than it does to be open to the possibility that something good might happen here. So you might manipulate things to try and get the outcome that you want. You might expect people to read your mind in relationships because it's so scary to say what you want, to ask for what you want, and you've been so conditioned to suppress all those needs, desires, thoughts, feelings, and so on, that you're hoping that someone reads your mind, and then when they don't, you're going to be upset with them. You hear that a lot, and I used to do that too. Well, they should know. It should be obvious. Have you said those kind of things? When in fact, we need to communicate those things to other people, even if it should be obvious. And when your needs aren't met in childhood, you develop this inner child who is very wounded. And it is trying to protect you and take care of you and has been doing this since you were a child because nobody else was doing that job. And the ways it takes care of you are very childish. You know, they do come from a child who never got the skills to grow into a competent adult. So when this child is driving the car, so to speak, which it often is, it is doing things like people pleasing to try and keep you alive. It is doing everything to avoid that fear of disappointment. And so, to try and win love and acceptance, even as an adult, that inner child is going to do the same thing that worked in the home. So, this is an adaptive coping skill, really, in childhood because it did protect you. It did keep you safe from your mother's outbursts, from any punishment that might have been coming. It kept you from being abandoned and rejected when you were very dependent on this person. But you continue to use that in adulthood and it becomes maladaptive. So you're using people pleasing to try and get what you want, but this is really hurting you in the long run, as you probably already know if you're watching this. So people pleasing doesn't allow you to set boundaries because you're avoiding that rejection at all cost. But in fact, life is about disappointing other people in order to avoid disappointing yourself. And I disappoint people all the time, and I let people down all the time in order to avoid not letting myself down. And I'll tell you, because I am still the child of a narcissist, there is extreme discomfort in that. And I still feel that discomfort. And sometimes my mind wants to trick me into believing that that discomfort means that I've done the wrong thing. But we can't be reliant always on our feelings to tell us the truth. We always want to take care of our feelings and validate them and normalize them and so on. And that's what self-compassion is all about. But also to tell yourself that just because I feel bad, remember, guilt is a conditioned response that you learned in childhood. Your mother used that against you. And that can still be in there whenever you do something for yourself. And you want to know that that guilt or any bad feeling after you stand up for yourself or choose yourself over someone else is not a sign that you shouldn't have done that. The work here now is to soothe that child inside who still feels bad or in danger when you don't put other people first, when you let someone else down in order to avoid letting yourself down. So you want to tend to the feelings and to that inner child inside and just give yourself some space to just feel whatever you feel instead of trying to push away the feeling or reject the feeling or tell yourself you shouldn't feel that way. However you feel is how you feel, and there's nothing wrong with it. Self-compassion is accepting those feelings, being curious about them. Why do I feel bad when I put myself first? It doesn't mean that I am bad. It's just a feeling, and it's a feeling that I was conditioned to feel as a child. And as a child, that did keep me safe. But now, and as an adult, I understand that it's just a leftover from that time that still lives in my body. And I can take care of myself through that, and it will pass. And it does. And when it does, then you can get the long-term benefit because that bad feeling is short-term. And that's the thing you've been avoiding. And that's what we do when our inner child is at play or driving the car, is we go for the short-term benefit. And in the long term, we just continue to stay stuck. But if you can withstand that short-term pain and hold yourself through it, in the long term, you're going to have the benefit first of building that muscle that helps you advocate for yourself, and also of having the deep pride of doing something so courageous for yourself as advocating on behalf of you instead of letting someone else get what they want and you don't. And you'll continue to build on that. And as you build on it, the feelings will get easier to manage. And you will see that you will start creating the life that you want because boundaries, which entail disappointing others and possibly experiencing rejection, they are essential to you having the life that you want. And so, how do you overcome this deep fear of disappointing others that keeps you from the life that you want? Well, one thing you want to do is really understand the dynamic at play. So, understand why you have this deep-seated fear that is really stored in your body and you can't talk yourself out of. You might want to look at the ACEs study, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And this is the large scale research they did back in 1995 that proved the link between childhood trauma, such as narcissistic abuse, and negative adult outcomes. So you want to get to know, like, what's your score? How has this impacted you? And so on. And I've got a book that deals directly with this topic. So it's called It's Not Your Fault: The Subconscious Reasons We Self-Sabotage and How to Stop. If you want to pick that up, you can get that wherever you find books online, and it's a very small investment. And I go into my story about how I overcame this connection between my self-sabotage and my childhood trauma, and how none of the therapy I had could help me with it because it didn't make that connection. And as soon as I did, doing my own research, educating myself on this topic and really getting clear on what was driving me is how I was finally able to overcome the self-sabotage that was really ruining my life. And I share that with you in this book, and it is dedicated to you, the reader. So if you are looking for, some real education on this topic, some solid steps on how to overcome it, along with my personal story on how I did, I share that in the book. And you've got to learn to set boundaries. And in doing so, you must learn to take care of that nervous system as well. Self-help often focuses too much on scripts and strategies. And that is a lot of what I was given when I was in therapy back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And it never helped me because it didn't get to the root of the issue, which is how the trauma was really stored in my body. So, you can tell me just say no, just you got to tell people no, you got to stand up for yourself. But when your body is in a state of survival, all those logical mantras and so on are really not going to have an impact. And you're going to resort back to that feeling of safety, short-term safety that came with not having the boundary. So learning to care for your nervous system is a big part of this because those feelings of guilt and so on are really going to overwhelm you. So doing things like EFT tapping as you work through those emotions are really going to help you when you go to set that boundary. You also want to prepare yourself for the pushback that's going to come from setting boundaries and accept that it's not going to feel good at first. You are not going to feel like, yes, I set that boundary. You're going to feel like the worst person in the world because that's how you've been conditioned. So understand that there are consequences to setting boundaries, and they are that some people are going to weed themselves out of your life. Some people are going to try to bully you into going back to the way you were when you were easy to push around and so on. Some people are going to leave. Some people are going to be angry with you. Yes, they are going to be disappointed with you. And so, all of these things, if you can prepare yourself for these and understand that setting boundaries is not about trying to make it the way that someone else is going to like it. The whole point is that it helps you decide and it helps other people decide who is going to be in your world, who is going to get past the velvet rope that is that barrier, that gentle barrier between yourself and the masses. You know, you have to have standards in place that tell people what are the rules of my game, so to speak. So, what do you have to show me before you get to come into my private VIP room? That's really what boundaries are. And you got to understand that certain people are never going to like your boundaries. And those are the very people that you set boundaries for in order to keep them out. They're toxic people, they're narcissistic people. And if you're one of those women who feels like you attract narcissists, that you keep getting into relationships with narcissists, more than likely boundaries is the issue because narcissists do test you early. They test your boundaries early on so that they can see if you are a good target to keep pushing. So if they can bully you or sweet talk you into lowering your boundaries early on, that's going to be their green light to keep going, to keep treating you worse and worse, to keep getting more and more out of you, to keep taking advantage of you at greater rates. And so you want to have those boundaries in place early, and you might call them standards. So standards are really telling the world who you are, what you stand for, what you put up with, and so on. And so a standard could be, I don't answer the phone or text after 9 o'clock at night. And it just becomes a rule that is across the board. It doesn't matter how much you love bomb me. It doesn't matter how much you bully me. I am not going to compromise my standard, even if you're my mother and so on. It could be that you have a certain amount of time before you answer a text. And it could be when you sleep with someone that you're dating. I have to be in a committed monogamous relationship before I sleep with someone. Maybe you have to be married before you sleep with someone. Who knows? But it's your standard, it's personal to you, and it can't be breached no matter how much someone sweet talks you or on the other side bullies you. That's your standard. This is how you operate. This is who you are. You want to start developing those so they're your non-negotiables. You should, I don't like the word should, but it is important to have deal breakers, to have non-negotiables so that you know beforehand, before you're put in this situation, what you put up with, what you expect, and so on. And you want to heal that inner child. So this looks like giving yourself the care and attention you never received. It is that self-compassion I referred to earlier of caring for your emotions, accepting all of them, validating them, normalizing them, and tending to your nervous system as you process through them. It means choosing those long-term benefits over the short-term fixes that the child chooses. And it also requires a certain amount of self-discipline. So self-discipline is a form of self-care and it is a form of tending to your inner child. So keeping those promises to yourself, whether it's making your bed every day, taking a shower every day, eating at the same time every day, going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, things like that, that habits and routines that you may not have been taught when you were a child, or you may have been forced to do against your will as a child. Now you get to choose those for yourself, and that self-discipline, keeping those promises to yourself, those are boundaries with yourself, and those are really important too for inner child healing. Allow yourself to play and explore in ways that you weren't allowed to as a child. So that starts with that getting curious about your feelings instead of pushing them away, allowing yourself to indulge in things that you weren't allowed to or that you couldn't even think about as a child because you were too busy trying to survive. Take your child out for an ice cream, do a fun thing that you would have loved to do as a child, but nobody let you do. Let the child know that she is cared for, that she matters. Don't reject her, don't push her away because that's just going to make her hold on tighter. Validate her, let her know that she took care of you the best way that she could, and you're actually really grateful for that. And now you get to take care of her. So you're not trying to eliminate her, you just want to give her a different job. And now that you know why you are so afraid of disappointing other people and tend to disappoint yourself instead, you can start to take these steps to overcome that fear. And you can also begin to practice disappointing people. Practice what it feels like to put yourself first and ask yourself, what do I want? And start to give that to yourself and practice speaking up for what you want, even when it's going to disappoint someone else, even when it's going to make someone unhappy with you, and just be prepared for the fact that it's not going to feel good, and that's okay. I can soothe myself through those feelings, those uncomfortable and difficult feelings, because I know that in the long run, this is going to benefit me. So thank you once again for listening. I'm really grateful to have you here. I would love to have you subscribe if this content is speaking to you, and this will help us get it out to as many people as possible. So thank you for being here, and I will talk to you next week.